I know I'm not like the only one. I was coming in and they patted me down and they took my tennis racket. So I'm like, God damn it, you know. Christ. Guys ready for some, he's going to be throwing out some wrestling dirt. Let me tell you that right now. And me, I know, I got a problem because my two favorite wrestlers are John Cena and Marty Jannetty, okay? And if you start, I know, it's a weird combo. Trust me, some people would say gay, but it's not, okay? They're like, what, did you just say his second favorite's Marty Jannetty? And I was like, he is. And, you know, I know Jim Cornette comes out, I'm going to have to do earmuffs if he's going to talk about JC or Marty Jannetty, you know, so it's going to be a good show. It's going to be a good show, and I got to bring up your two guys, all right, that are from the area. You probably know them from the Sam Roberts podcast.
That's not us.
No, they said they were from a podcast. The Steve Austin podcast. These two guys are from.
What?
Steve Austin podcast? No, not you.
That's not us.
You probably saw these two guys in the Talk is Jericho podcast.
Can you believe this guy? That's not us, man. Come on, you know who we are.
Okay. These two guys are from, I guess you could say, from another wrestling podcast. It's Steve Credo and Jonathon Benjamin, everybody. Give it up. All right.
Poughkeepsie, New York. How's it going, everybody?
Just give me that.
This is it. This is the capital of pro wrestling. I mean, look at you guys. You guys got wrestling shirts and whatnot, so you know what's going on here tonight. Everybody kept it casual, the wrestling shirts, so that's great. But Jonathan, this is the capital of pro wrestling. There's so many historic things that have happened in Poughkeepsie. The WWE used to record here right at the Civic Center. Now you have Tommy Dreamer's House of Hardcore at the Civic Center. We have Poughkeepsie's own, the now Vic Delicious Hale Collins, a part of Poughkeepsie. Poughkeepsie is pro wrestling. It's so historic.
Yeah, another historic thing's going to happen tonight. You guys all know Jim Cornette. He doesn't get up this way a lot, so we want to make sure we have a really good show, so we'll come back here. And I know that we've been doing this for a long time, so if you guys would come check us out at anotherwrestlingpodcast.com. I know you didn't pay to hear us talk, so we want to bring out Mr. J.D. Cornette, and you guys, are you ready to get experience?
Jesus H. fucking Christ. They run out of the budget before they built the rest of the stage? I feel like I'm being interrogated here. Finally, Jim Cornette has come back to Poughkeepsie. I brought this just in case you don't fucking laugh. Alright, we're gonna put this over here for a second. I'm gonna get rid of this. Do I room my ass is too big to sit? Here, give me that chair. I do sit-down comedy. This is bad for my back. Hold on here. I don't do stand-up because I'm old. I will stand up for a minute, though. Here's the thing. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I also want to thank you for this freezing fucking cold weather. No, seriously, you can hear my voice. I'm hoarse because I've been nice to people today. We were at the big event down at LaGuardia. A lot of talking last night in Newburgh. Who was here in Newburgh last night at the show? I said Ray Mysterio showed up. Thank you, Ray. I appreciate it. There you go. I knew Ray was a Jim Cornette guy. So a lot of talking, a lot of abuse on the voice, but also every time I go to leave the fucking house, I took the winter off. I didn't do anything in December, January till last weekend because I didn't want to travel in cold weather. So what happens? I try to leave last weekend from Louisville to go to the Carolinas. It snows in West Virginia. Then I get a little bit of a cold. Then I come up here. I'm going to come up here. I leave a day early because it's going to snow in Pennsylvania. It's fucking March. Does it ever get warmer here? Yes, it's going to be 70 degrees here on Tuesday. I leave town on Monday. The Republicans say that there's no climate change. Well, it's going to be colder in Louisville, Kentucky on Tuesday than it is here in Poughkeepsie, which means they fucked up the environment. They just don't want to admit it. Anytime you hear the Republicans speaking, they're fucking up the environment. It's noise pollution anyway. Who here, by the way, is a pro-choice, pro-legalization, liberal, left-wing, pinko, commie socialist? Who? And who here is an asshole? There's only one. Oh, we got the Republicans right up front, right? Okay. Are you going to vote for Trump? He's like Paul Lee. I wouldn't believe him if his tongue was notarized. He'd rather climb a tree and tell a lie than stand on the ground and tell the truth. He's a megalomaniac with fucking orangutan hair, and you want him to have his finger on the nuclear fucking button, right? This is what you want. The other choices we got the religious fanatic. We got the goddamn guy from Florida that, he's a power-hungry Rubio. He's a power-hungry fuck. He just wants to get elected to bigger shit all the time, right? He's already forsaken the state of Florida so that he can get elected to higher office, and he's got delusions of grandeur. This is the best they can do. Now, I'm not saying that Hillary's the only Democrat that I really don't like in the world. I couldn't warm up to her if we were cremated together, right? I'm feeling the burn because at least he would shake him up. And you know what? Here's the thing. He's the only one telling the truth because he don't want the money. He's old enough, he's going to die in 4 years anyway. Right? He doesn't need that much money. So I'm feeling the burn. I think something's going to come out about Trump. Him and the orangutan having the affair, possibly. Ted Cruz, they wanted to see Obama's birth certificate. He was born in fucking Honolulu. Ted Cruz admits he was born in Canada. How does that work? Why does he get to be president? Anyway, we will get political tonight a little bit if you ask the right questions, because here's the key to this show. You guys are participating in this. I'm not just going to stand up here and drone on. All the shows are different because this is the Jim Cornette experience. You ask me questions and I tell you stories and talk about what I experience. So therefore, if you ask bad questions, it's a bad show. It's not my fault. Nobody's better at being Jim Cornette than I am. So if the show is bad, that means that you guys should have come more prepared. All right? If we've got that agreement. It doesn't have to be about wrestling, but it can be. I see you guys are eating. I hope you're drinking heavily because it does help the show. But, you know, and Steve and Jonathon, where are they? I'm blinded now. Where are you on the night of the 21st?
All the way in the back.
You're all the way in the back. Oh, you're trying to slip out already, right?
You caught us, so.
Fucking
if you want to flag us down, we'll come over to you.
Flag you down? I can't even fucking see you. I see my face on one of your chests. But anyway, if you have a question, when we ask for questions, don't just jump up, become a mob. But when we ask for questions, if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and then you can ask your question. If it's a good one, I'll answer it. If it's not, I'll belittle you. And we will go back and forth on this, so it doesn't have to be about wrestling. It can be about music. It can be about politics. Don't ask about just stupid shit, though. For heaven's sake, don't try to be funny. That's my job. I'm trying to be funny. I'm just not succeeding. So with those ground rules underway, we hopefully will have a good time. And did I mention start drinking? That will definitely help. Now, since I cannot see my helpers, and I can hardly see anybody raising their hands, come back. Where are you guys? Come back up here a little closer. All right. Is that Steve or is that Jonathon? Okay, now I can see. See, here's the thing. I don't know which one's which anyway. So it doesn't really matter. But you cover this side, and he'll cover this side, and we'll meet in Scotland before you. And somebody told me Vic Delicious was here. Where are you, Vic? I see a hand waving. Thank you very much for coming. You still owe Rip Rogers $100 for the amateur class at OBW. He told me to bring that message to you.
I gave it to him in squats.
You don't look like you've been doing a lot of squats lately. Friends are enemies of Vic, I see. But anyway, and I assume nobody came except for the show. Nobody just came for the food and just wandered in here and wonders why I'm here wearing my face on my shirt, right? Everybody knows what the fucking deal is. Okay. Very good. With that said, I think without further ado, because I've already doo-dooed enough, we should probably get a question to get the ice broken, get the cherry popped, so to speak. So does anyone have a question they'd like to ask? And fucking immediately, Rey Mysterio's fucking hand goes in. All right, let's get it over with. What have you got to say for yourself?
First of all, how was your mama?
Say it again?
How is your mother?
Is that microphone on, or is he just an idiot?
He asked how your mother is.
That's not a question. You've only got one more chance. No, you can't suck up now. No. But look here. Wait a minute. I got some Carmex. Why don't you put that on your lips if you're going to kiss my ass with the T-shirt?
How's the T-shirt?
Okay. What is your question?
My friend wanted to know, can you make one with that says girl?
As a matter of fact, didn't I see you at the Northeast show? No, I saw you today. Email me and we'll see if we can find a stray I'm a Jim Cornette girl shirt. Thank you very much for starting this fucking program off so we can immediately go in the toilet. With nothing happening. Nothing. Thank you very much. No wonder you wear a mask. It's probably easier when you try to have sex with her and she turns you down. But you should turn it around that way you can't see out of it. All right. Anyway. Can we find one of the people who have the power of speech and cognitive ability?
Well, Jim, since you tried to get Rey Mysterio to ask, I figure let's bring it back to Rey Mysterio. You have a story about some Mexican midget. What can the
okay. We were talking about this in the car when the guys from Collector's Realm were driving me around today, and they said, "Oh, you got to talk about that tonight." We were talking about being in the city, because, everybody knows, I love New York State. I think it's beautiful up here, the trees and the woods and Hudson Valley. Go to New York City, fucking the shits, right? Every one of my phobias comes crashing together. I'm claustrophobic, I'm antisocial, I got the OCD, I'm a clean freak, and the city is very dirty. It kills my sinuses, the air pollution, the whole 9 yards. I hate the city, the traffic, the pollution, the mess, the rude people, they bump into you. So naturally, when I was with the WWF, what did I have to do on a regular basis? I had to go to New York City. And when they started, who remembers the short-lived television program from the WWF, purveyors of fine wrestling programming, Shotgun Saturday Night? Okay, so besides the fact that Vince McMahon is a control freak and a workaholic, and he has no hobbies, no outside interests, he hadn't seen a movie, gone to the grocery since 1984, he's also even more of a preparation freak than I am. So he wanted, Shotgun Saturday Night started at midnight, but we had to go into the city at like noon that day. So we would do the vignettes beforehand, and one day, because of Vince's predilection for toilet humor, this is when they brought the Mexican minis in, and they had a mini Vader and a mini Mankind and a mini this and a mini that. And he thought it would be hilarious, since I managed Vader, if I also brought the mini Vader in from Mexico City. And of course, since I'm cheap, I brought him in on the Greyhound bus. We go to the bus station, and here comes, we're shooting now guerrilla style, because we have no permits really. They tell me this happens down in New York at the bus station all the time, people with video cameras and odd outfits. I'm in a multicolored suit, carrying a tennis racket. Here comes a Mexican midget dressed like Vader, supposedly off the bus from Guadalajara or whatever. He comes up and he's hopping up and down because he's got to go to the bathroom. And I'm supposed to take him into the bathroom, and the sight gag is going to be that he's too short for the urinal, so I have to pick him up. But since he's a heavy midget, he was the world's heaviest midget, I can't really pick him up, and hilarity is going to ensue, right? Well, for one thing, I felt kind of silly when we walked in the bus station bathroom, dressed as I am, him dressed as he is, and he's going to fucking act like he's pissing, but he's not really pissing, and I'm trying to lift him up, and people are looking like, what the fuck? Secondly, the urinal is not tall enough. The sight gag didn't work, right? Because it's down, it's only 6 inches off the ground, so I'm lifting him up for no apparent purpose. The whole thing, as they say, fell in the toilet. It wasn't funny, but they still aired it on the show, because why wouldn't they? And then that night, of course it's cold weather again, they have the midgets push me over and pants me, so of course I've got the boxer shorts on with the big red hearts, and he chases me out the back door, and once the door closes, I realize I'm fucking locked out. I'm on the street now, in a suit jacket, and fucking boxer shorts and dress pants, carrying a multicolored tennis racket. I have to go all the way around the building where we were shooting back in the front to get back in the building, and I thought I was going to be raped and murdered. Which I understand is a regular occurrence here. Thank you. You guys are a wonderful audience. What's in those drinks? I want to get one for everybody. So anyway, so the Mexican midget thing didn't turn out well, but there was another Shotgun Saturday Night incident we were talking about in the car. Jake the Snake comes back. And they put him on the creative team. And I love Jake, despite the fact that he once won the Smoky Mountain Heavyweight Championship, then I never saw him again. At least I kept the belt. I didn't let him take the belt home, right? But he had to lose it in Bluefield, West Virginia. But they bring Jake in, and one day he's on the creative team, so he's supposed to be down there for this production meeting we got to go to also at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon for this midnight show. He said, I'm not going to take the limo with Vince and you guys. I'll catch my own ride so I can get a little bit more sleep. Okay, I wish I could do the same. 2 o'clock comes meeting, no Jake. 3 o'clock, no Jake. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, no Jake. He comes in at like 9:15. He said, I called a cab at the hotel in Stamford while I was waiting. I fell asleep for 7 fucking hours. So he comes in, and Jake was shortly thereafter not on the creative team anymore. And shortly thereafter, Shotgun Saturday Night, thankfully, went the way of all bad television programming, which Raw is currently in that category.
It's on Pop TV.
Say again?
It's on Pop TV with TNA.
No, TNA, but who watches TNA? Yeah, it's kind of like you watch TNA like you watch porn. You turn the sound down and there's nobody around. You don't want anybody outside the room to know you're doing it, right? They went from Spike TV to Destination America. And by the way, the fine programming on Destination America, all Tuesday is like ice fishing in Finland. Is the whole block. Then they've gone to Pop TV. The next day, they're going to start shooting the shows on Dixie's phone in her backyard. But anyway, where was I going with this before we talked about TNA? Raw? Raw, whatever.
Shotgun.
Shotgun. No, I was done with Shotgun. Who's calling this? You or me? Delicious, slap him. Oh, I know. Raw is supposedly the longest running action-adventure program in America, according to the WWE programmers. Except the problem is, there's very little action, and it's not much of an adventure. Unless you like hearing the slow-headed Cro-Magnon son-in-law talk for 30 minutes at the start of the program. I'm sorry. I'm a big fan of Shane McMahon. I like Shane. He's my favorite McMahon. He's a nice guy. I don't know what it says about the WWE that he's going to probably sell more tickets against The Undertaker than any of their wrestlers, but I like Shane. Stephanie, don't like. The son-in-law, not fond of. Never had any crosswords with Vince, but he's the one who's allowed all this shit to go on, so fuck him too. Anyway, all right, now that Ray has set the bar and the expectations incredibly low, does anybody have an actual literate question that we might get this thing started with? And Vic Delicious!
I do. And I've been waiting a very long time to ask you this, because I never, as a wrestler in OVW, I never got to ask you this question, but all the times that we would be doing television and Johnny Ace would call and whatever, and things would get fucked up. How did that process go? Why did things get fucked up the way they did? And was it by email? Was it phone call? And how bad would they make them? What did they do? Because I would only see the end result. When you get to the building, I only saw that part.
When I come to the building, I start throwing my briefcase and I start kicking chairs over. That motherfucker! Here's the thing. We had a developmental program for the WWE, and it was doing quite nicely when Jim Ross, an intelligent human being, was in charge of talent relations. But then he couldn't take living in Connecticut anymore. I believe he called it one time on Raw that overpriced hellhole. So he moves back to Oklahoma and just keeps doing the commentary on Raw, and they put John Laurinaitis, Johnny Ace, in charge of talent relations. The reason they did this is the same reason he got a big spot in Japan with Giant Baba's group, All Japan, is because he was a cute blonde gaijin with dimples and looked good in a suit and said yes a lot to Mrs. Baba, and she thought he was cute. Stephanie thought he was cute also. And also he said yes a lot to her. So therefore, he wanted to push my buttons to run me off so that they could run roughshod over OVW, and I was generally not going to allow that to happen. So every Wednesday we do TV, and I'm a staff of one, right? I've booked the show, I've laid the show out, everything carefully. It's a wrestling school. We didn't have a lot of resources. They also didn't give us millions of dollars like they do NXT. They started NXT in Florida so all of Johnny Ace's friends could have jobs without having to move. But anyway, I digress. So at like 5 o'clock the day of the show, he would call and he would say, well, you need to put the boogeyman on TV. Well, we just sent the boogeyman home because he's got shingles and he's contagious and we don't want everybody to come down with shingles. Can he do a promo? No, because we just sent him home. Well, you need to put so-and-so on TV. I put so-and-so on TV last week, and she was so bad that she hurt the fans' feelings. They brought the tickets back they bought the week before for refunds. That's how bad it was. It fucking stunk. So I'm not going to put her on this TV. I'll put her in a dark match, and I'll tape it, and I'll send it to you. She needs to be on TV. You can't just take a tape. No, she needs to be on TV. No, she ain't going to be, Johnny. One time, Doug Basham, do you remember when Doug Basham came in bald? My top heel has this long, dark hair. And he looked good. He had a great body, and he had this long, dark hair, and he's the top guy, and people are into him, and he cut a pretty good promo, and he's a great worker. He walks in one day completely bald. He looked like a 40-year-old truck driver. So what the fuck happened to you? He said, they told me to shave my head. We went to SmackDown, and the creative team wanted to see what I looked like bald. I said, if they're so fucking creative, tell them to pretend and imagine. So I called Johnny Ace. I said, Johnny, my top heel just walked in looking like a 40-year-old truck driver. Why can't your goddamn creative team pretend, or at least tell me with 2 weeks' notice I'll book a hair match and sell tickets to it, and he can cut his hair in the ring? Of course, I'm telling this to his voicemail because he'd never answer my phone calls, because he knew he was generally going to get motherfucked when I did. I believe the last time I called him, I was already gone from OVW, but that's when they fucked Danny Davis. They told Danny, they said, go ahead, you're figured into our long-term plans, go ahead and re-sign the lease on the building. And I still own part of the company, by the way, even though I was working for TNA at the time. Go ahead, sign the lease on the building, go ahead and renew the contracts with the TV station, you're in our long-term plans. That's because they hadn't set things up enough to fuck Danny yet. So as soon as they did, 6 months later, in this 3-year contract, they said, well, we're exercising our out. So I called Johnny, I left a message on his machine, I said, that right there is an example of why that nobody wants to do business with you fucking people, because you fuck your business partners that have been loyal, so fuck you, fuck Stephanie, fuck Shane, fuck Vince, fuck Linda, fuck your little demon seed fucking children that you fucking have up there, Shane and the Cro-Magnon son-in-law, fuck all of you. We'll get along without you. And we did, actually. And then Danny Davis is still running OVW. I sold my piece back, nevertheless. So, thank you, Vic, for bringing up these goddamn things that make me grumpy. I appreciate it. It's guys like that I was on blood pressure medication when I was booking OVW. Like, I love you. You were a great talent, though. You did very well, and you've done the people of Poughkeepsie and the Hudson Valley proud. Now let's see if we can get a question that we can actually have fun with instead of making me mad.
Well, we were talking earlier, and I don't want to bring it up too soon, but we're going to talk about Voldemort a little bit. There's a Russo gun story we need to know.
I want to talk about this because everybody thinks I'm crazy, and I am, to be honest. I've said this before. Everybody in wrestling is crazy. Either you're crazy so you get into wrestling, or you get into wrestling and crazy people in it make you crazy, but one way or another you end up crazy. But I hope I'm crazy in a good way. A lot of people think, because people who read things on the internet, and I don't know where some of this shit comes. Some of it I do know where it comes from. It comes from people like Russo. Once again, he's about as valid as Trump with anything he says. But I don't know where they get this shit. And they repeat it like it's fact. And suddenly it becomes fact, because perception is reality, as Vince says. So, the Archbishop of Talentberry, as I call him, Vince Russo, he doesn't get guys over, he gets guys under. I mean, he was in charge of booking Kurt Angle and Jeff Hardy and all these top stars in TNA, and suddenly people in the airports were going, are you still wrestling? He came out on Jim Ross's podcast not too long ago, and I've done JR's show too, and I love JR, we've been friends for 30 years. If there's any fault I find with him, it's that he associates sometimes with the wrong element. But he told this story, Russo did, that I once, while he was riding with me, that I was cut off in traffic by some woman, and I chased her down, and I pulled a gun on her, and I waved it at her, and was mad at her and everything, and he said, why did you do that? I said, because I'm a heel, right? And he tells these stories to himself long enough that he actually starts believing them. Here's what actually happened. We're coming back, I remember, because he only rode with me twice. And he said, I never rode with him again after that. That was not his fucking choice, by the way. Fuck. It was probably for his better health because I would have choked him. But we were coming back from a Raw, I believe it was in Albany. It was in upstate New York. We were coming back to Connecticut, and somehow he ended up in my car because he needed a ride. And we started talking about the old days in wrestling and how at one point the heels actually had heat, because before people like Russo got involved in wrestling, people actually believed this shit, right? He finished that off, but they used to. And many times we've had riots and we've been attacked by fans, and we've had situations where they jumped the rail or where they tried to get us in the parking lot. And I mean, other guys have been stabbed and shot at. One guy, Eric the Red, even got run over by a car in the parking lot because the fans were mad, right? And yeah, exactly. And I said, so a lot of times we'd had heat, you know, we had to show our guns to get out of the parking lot or whatever. You carried a gun? I said, Vince, in the real world, especially if I was traveling alone or some of the heels were traveling alone, you're in a car late at night. You are on television all over the place, whether nationally or locally or regionally, telling people that they're no good rednecks, trash, coupon clipping, welfare cases. You're insulting them. You're trying to make them as mad as possible. You stop at a diner or a truck stop or a gas station. Some of these people, especially late at night, may have a little liquid courage in them, and they want to do something about it. And you need some, equalizer to get out of the situation. So yes, it was common. All the heels and a lot of the baby faces carried guns, especially when you also might be carrying large sums of cash on you, especially if you were promoting a town. I said it wasn't uncommon. You carried a gun? I said, so I reached under the seat and I had my handgun in a case and I pulled it out. I said, yes, because this was 20 years ago and we hadn't slapped them in the face with the fact that everything about wrestling is completely phony except the fact that we all hate each other behind the scenes. And I said, yeah, just in case, I've had to use this a couple of times to get out of a sticky situation, just showing it to people, and you get out of it. Why? I said, because, Vince, I'm a heel. I've just been telling you this for 10 minutes. You don't understand. From that story, it became I was a raving maniac, chased this poor woman down, waved a gun at her, obviously scared her out of, 10 years growth. He's a moron. He's an idiot. And he constantly, he's like the little kid that pulls his pants down and shows his tallywhacker on the playground to get attention. He does this shit because he had 2 years of success crammed into a 23-year career. And he doesn't know how to handle it now that everybody hates him and nobody gives a shit whether he lives, dies, turns blue, or catches on fire. So that's one of the misconceptions about me. There's another misconception. Who here has heard of Joey Ryan? 1, 2. Okay. Have you heard about the wrestler that does the dick spot?
Yeah.
Okay. Once again, this idiot, he's a little small underneath preliminary wrestler out in California that works for small independent organizations. And the way he got attention was somehow or another, he figured out that if he claimed that he had the world's strongest dick, that he would get attention. And actually he did. A lot of news sources, a lot of the TMZs and the gossip sites actually played the footage of the guy grabs Joey Ryan's dick. And I mean, to be honest, I've been on cards with him and I've seen him in the shower. You'd need the Hubble telescope to find this fucking thing. But the wrestler grabs his dick and he hooks up like this and he flings his hips and he throws the wrestler and he takes a big bump because his dick is so strong, right? And somebody tweeted it to me, right, and said, have you seen this video, please comment. And there was the freeze frame, right, and it was just, and Ryan, I didn't know what it was, I knew it was something I didn't want to see, but it looked like he was sticking his dick in this guy's ear and I said, I won't watch the video because I'm not interested, but and Ryan's standing there like a big grin. I said, it obviously looks like Joey Ryan loves sticking his dick in guys' faces. I don't know what to tell you. He comes back, what a homophobic thing to say. No, it wasn't a condemnation, it wasn't an indictment, it was just an observation. It looks like you're having a wonderful time sticking your dick in some guy's fucking ear. I don't know what to tell you. But by that, I became homophobic. No, I wasn't insulted because I was homophobic. I was insulted because it's another example of the guys in the business making wrestling look stupid. I know some of you guys have been longtime fans. 20 years ago, did you ever see people doing obviously stupid, implausible things that are just stupid and just silly? No, you saw Steve Austin and The Rock battling in the main event on a pay-per-view, and everybody bought it, and there were people screaming and yelling. You didn't see Steve Austin hulking up with the power of his dick, and by the way, his is a lot bigger than Joey Ryan's, and throwing some guy over the top rope with it. It's phony, and it's silly, and it demeans what we do, and it makes it all meaningless, and it makes it seem like that everybody can do this shit. It's all just to be laughed at. And that's not what draws money and sells tickets. That's not what we taught guys at OVW. We trained guys like John Cena and Randy Orton and Batista and Brock and Shelton and all the rest of those guys who had pretty good success. Joey Ryan is not in that company.
Bigger dicks.
And they have bigger dicks, yes. But Vic, you're a bigger dick than Joey Ryan. So anyway, I'm not homophobic. It's like that Seinfeld episode where, you know, Jerry's dentist was converting from Catholicism to Judaism. And Jerry Seinfeld was mad because that means he gets a quarter of the market. He can tell all the jokes with immunity, right? So Seinfeld goes to the dentist priest, and he goes to the confessional. And he tells the priest that he believes that his dentist is converting to Judaism under false pretenses. And the priest says, and this offends you as a Jewish person? He said, no, it offends me as a comedian. Well, it doesn't offend me because I'm not homophobic. It offends me as a person who's been living in the wrestling business for the past 30 years that these jackoffs are allowed to come in and do this. Nobody says anything to them. So I say something to them. It's like the Young Bucks. Who knows these two fucking uncircumcised bricks? The Young Bucks. I like them. They're nice kids. They're big as a minute, right? It's not credible that they can actually whip somebody in a fight, but they're good athletes. They do some cool shit. They do too much, and people don't sell it. And it just demeans it. It makes it harder for the guys who really try to take their profession seriously because they have to risk their bodies more. But they got on the internet with this tape where, I swear to God, I'm not making this up, for this one kid's birthday. He's 8 years old, right? And instead of taking him to Chuck E. Cheese, which is what Lance Storm suggested they could have done, they super kicked the kid. But first, the kid, they super kicked the kid's father, and he goes down, and then the kid makes a comeback on him. He's 8 years old. He's throwing punches to their stomach, and even though they're only 4'6" apiece, the Young Bucks, he still can't reach any higher than their stomach. He's throwing good-looking punches too, which makes it even worse. Looks like anybody can do this shit. And they're selling for him. And then he hits the ropes to come and clothesline him, and they double super kick him. If a top tag team can double super kick an 8-year-old child and not require facial reconstruction surgery afterwards, that means they're weaker than cat's kids. They couldn't draw a greasy string out of dog's ass, is what I'm saying. And they don't realize how silly and how stupid this makes them look, and it makes the profession look. That's why, once again, it's not that I hate the Young Bucks personally. It's just that I'm sick and tired of these idiots demeaning the profession that we've all tried to make a lot of money in the past and would still be doing so if it wasn't for the fact that they make it look like anybody can do this shit. It's something to be laughed at and not taken seriously. So, once again, the internet goes, well, he doesn't like the Young Bucks because they do all these 4- or 5-star matches, they do all these moves. No, I don't like the Young Bucks because they're just fucking stupid. And they don't realize it makes it harder for everybody, including them. They're 28 years old now, when they're 35 and they can't walk because all this flippy-do shit they do, they'll realize maybe they should have calmed down a little bit. And that's, believe me, I don't fall down on purpose anymore. My bumping days are over with, but I still feel for the guys that have to go out there and do more and more damage to their bodies to get less and less of a response because of these asswipes. It's nothing personal. They should just go the fuck away. Anyway, where's my boys?
Got a question over here, Jim.
My question is, what are your best memories about booking with Jim Kerr, Ric Flair, and Kevin Sullivan? And part two of the question, how did that lead you to Rick Rubin? So.
Well, that's a long story, and we probably won't tell it all here, otherwise everybody will walk out. But no, I loved working with Flair and Kevin Sullivan. Rick is the one that first gave me my first booking job. He put me on the WCW booking committee. I love working with Kevin Sullivan. He's still a friend of mine to this day, so is Rick. Jim Herd, he ran off the Road Warriors. He ran off Ric Flair. He ran off the Midnight Express. He succeeded in giving Vince McMahon pretty much an unmolested 7-year run at being the top and the only really wrestling promotion in the country doing any business. Vince was under federal indictment, about to go to prison on steroid charges, had a horrible early 90s run of bad talent and poor creative, and still kicked WCW's ass. Jim Herd, if it was raining soup, he'd be out in the yard with a fork. He was a complete idiot. No, he was. He was a complete idiot. And he maligned and just bugged everybody. For an old man with gray hair, he looked like he was wearing a coonskin cap on his head at all times. He had this big hair helmet. And he wouldn't leave anything alone. He was hired by Turner Broadcasting, who had hired a string of real pips to run the company, because his wife was best friends with Jack Petrick's wife, who was a TBS executive. And he had once been a director in St. Louis at the local station in the 60s when they did the wrestling program there. That was in the days they didn't even tell the director what was going on. So he was completely not even smart to the business. So as I began looking for a way to get away from him, before I told Bobby I wanted to give my notice one day by kicking his office door in at CNN Center and taking a blank pistol and fired about 4 or 5 shots at him, right? Just I quit, fuck you. And Bobby brought me back to reality. He's like, Horty, as many people as hate that son of a bitch, don't you think he's got a real gun in his top desk drawer? And I'm like, oh, yeah, you might be right. So anyway, I had my last year in WCW, a friend of mine was a DJ in Georgia, and I'd known for a while that he went to work for American Recordings, Rick Rubin's record company, and Rubin was a huge wrestling fan, still is, and he liked old-style wrestling. Ric Flair was his favorite. He liked the old NWA instead of the WWF at that time because it was grittier and more real, and Rubin's all about, controversy. A lot of his acts have been controversial. He's the one who signed Andrew Dice Clay, got the biggest comedy album of the decade. Of course, Andrew was kind of one-trick pony. But anyway, I met Rick in Atlanta, and we started talking on the phone every once in a while. He said, I asked him one time, I said, would you like to, get involved in maybe an old-fashioned territory? He said, I'd love to, because it wasn't expensive at that. It wasn't that expensive at that point in time. And so finally, when Stan and I quit WCW, I called him up. I said, let me come out and let's talk about this. And that's how we got the idea. I'd had the idea for Smoky Mountain Wrestling riding in the car because in between fantasies of, gouging Jim Herd's eyeballs out, I'd ride in the back seat when the Midnight were driving, and I would look through the road atlas, and I'd say, boy, that used to be a great territory, and that used to be a great territory. And then we started going to Knoxville, and that was the one place that WCW was still drawing a crowd in. Until they killed it with all the no-shows. The guys would get hangnails. They were on guaranteed contracts. They couldn't work. They'd be in a cast from ass to appetite. And, and just trying to milk the company for a check. And I said Knoxville had a great wrestling tradition, so maybe we could base it there. It's a mid-sized market with other TV markets around it that wouldn't, be that horrible. And, of course, found out later on, long story and not for a comedy club, the deregulation of TV made it harder to get TV stations, because that's when the infomercials came in. Richard Simmons' Deal-A-Meal. Instead of putting the wrestling shows or any shows that people watched on TV, they would just take a check for $1,000 or $2,000 a week and just, here, play this tape. And it'd be 1-800-buy this shit, right? Pope Heel Pocket Fisherman. That's why it was all over the schedule then. So, but anyway, that's how the whole thing got started. Just out of my frustration that all these guys like the Rock and Roll Express, and Tracy Smothers, and the Armstrongs, and so many guys didn't have a spot up here in Cartoon Land for Vince, but at the same time, WCW had run off so much good talent also. And I almost got Flair. I got Rubin, and then nobody knows this story until my book comes out. Rubin said, offer Ric Flair $10,000 a shot for 20 shots a year. He can be our champion. There's $200,000, 20 days a year. He can do whatever the fuck he wants and go to Japan. And I did, and he was thinking about it, but then Vince said, he's going to go to the WWF, stay on TV, fine. But Ric Flair was almost going to be the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Heavyweight Champion. Unfortunately, we ended up with Brian Lee as first. Not quite an even trade. Anyway, where's my boys?
Okay.
The fun table over here. Keep this going. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pop the top. I'm gonna open up a can of sugar-free whoop ass right here. And this should be entertaining as all shit.
We talked about this last night. One has a great story. You threatening to shoot Brock Lesnar.
Oh, jeez. Here's what happened. Brock was training in OVW, and to be honest, I loved almost everybody that trained there. Brock was not one of them. Because he was making $250,000 a year to go to school. He had never been a wrestling fan, didn't know what wrestling was really all about except amateur wrestling, which he was the NCAA champion. He's a genetic mutant, a freak of nature, a great athlete. That was his attribute. His negative parts were basically that he was a boring fuck from the farm in South Dakota somewhere, right? And he wasn't very exciting, and he didn't know what wrestling was supposed to look like or how to do it. That's why I teamed him up with Shelton Benjamin, because Shelton was a wrestling fan since birth and the best natural athlete we ever signed. I think JR just tweeted that today. And so I made him a tag team. But Brock, he respected the coaches and he respected the other guys, but the managers, the referees, or the ring crew, or whoever, he pushed them around. And somehow, in a space of like 3 weeks, he managed to alienate both my top referees, my best friend from childhood, and my girlfriend. And the way he alienated my girlfriend was she was another one of the managers. And he was going to give her a press slam because she took great bumps. But she had recently had her stamens pierced. Everybody knows what the stamens is. It's down south of the Farnham and up above the taint. Well, she had it pierced, so she said, Brock, when you pick me up, don't squeeze the stamens because I just had it pierced, it's sore. All afternoon, he's ribbing her. I'm going to do it. I'm going to squeeze it. She, don't do it. I'm going to squeeze it. Don't do it. I'm going to squeeze it. Don't do it. So finally, comes time to the press slam on TV, boom. She comes back in and she's fucking hot, right? She's in pain and she's mad and she told me he was going to do it and he did it. He squeezed my stamens. I said, what the fuck, right? So then he comes back in, he's like, shut the fuck up, I didn't do it on purpose, I didn't do it, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, I guess, yes, you did. He says, fuck you. I said, hold on. First of all, you dumb fucking meat-headed motherfucker, you can't fucking tell somebody you're going to rib them all afternoon and you're going to do something, then do it whether you mean it or not. They still think you're going to do it on purpose. You're going to get in trouble if you're in a locker room and you keep doing that. Because Brock had always been the college jock that everybody catered to because he was a star athlete. He wasn't used to being treated like one of the boys. Well, he was getting treated like one of the boys. I said, you can't say you're going to do it and then do it whether you mean it or not because they'll think it was on purpose. Secondly, don't you say fuck you to her in front of me or I'm going to have to fucking shoot you. I didn't threaten to shoot him. I simply related the facts that I was going to have to shoot him. Because what, I'm going to fight this big fucker? That's another thing he didn't understand. Nobody's going to fight this fucking beast. If he's mad, you're mad at him, whatever the fuck. If it comes to a confrontation, most normal people will just shoot this fucker and try to sort it out in court, right? So I wanted to make him realize that when he's in a locker room with guys that are fucking tough guys in their own right, but may not want to necessarily go down that route, he may just get fucking shot in the fucking knees.
Remember when he knocked out Vivacious Charles with a slap?
Yes, slapped one of the fucking underneath guys, knocked him out, didn't give a shit, blah blah blah. He pie-faced Bolin. Kenny Bolin gave his girlfriend a hug, not Sable, the one that wasn't surgically reconstructed, the one he had beforehand. He gives her a hug. Hey, darling, how are you? Brock comes out in a fit of pique, apparently caused by the supplements he was taking. And fucking pie-face is my best friend. Kenny's like, what the fuck? Let's go, my girlfriend. What do you think? I'm trying to fucking rape her and give her a fucking hug, right? So anyway, he made a lot of friends. But then he got out of developmental because he told everybody, well, my girlfriend in Minnesota, she's pregnant, she's going to have a baby, so I got to go home. So they're still paying him $250,000 a year, but they let him go home for 6 months before he joins the main roster and train with Brad Ringens up in Minneapolis. And in the meantime, His girlfriend has a baby, and he promptly dumps her, and he fucking ends up taking up with Sable. And I'll tell you, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned with Sable, if I want to play with 40-year-old plastic, I've got some Matchbox cars at home. Right? We used to call him Block Lesnar, short for Blockhead. So Brock, and also then he wrote in his book, well, I couldn't wait to get out of Louisville. Guess what? We couldn't wait for you to fucking leave, Brock, so fuck you. All right, there you go. Anyway, and I know you had something you wanted to ask me about when we were talking in the back. What was your, was it Steve or Jonathon? One or the other had something I want to ask me about ribs.
Yeah, tell us a little about Bobby Fulton.
We were talking about that earlier too. Bobby Fulton, who remembers the Fantastics? They were a great tag team. Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers just passed away last year, and I'd known Tommy for like 30-something years, but Bobby Fulton was one of my first best friends when I was a photographer. He was just starting out as a rookie, and we were good friends, and he always wanted to play ribs on me, but the ribs always backfired, right? And one night we're in Washington, D.C. at the D.C. Armory. It's an old building, really, in bad disrepair, and they had the old radiators in the locker room for the heat. And it's scalding hot in the middle of the wintertime in this locker room, and I go in the bathroom to take a piss. And everybody remembers I used to wear colorful suits and clothing. So as I'm standing in the stall of the toilet taking a piss, right? And all of a sudden I said, God damn, it's even hotter than I thought it was. And I looked down, my pants are on fire. I'm talking flames, and the thing is, I'm wearing polyester, so that shit melts. And so I look down and I whip these things off and get out of them, because if it shit melts on your skin, it's serious, right? Bobby had balled up some toilet paper and lit it with a lighter and thrown it under the door of the stall to play a rib on me, but he didn't know he was going to set me on fucking fire. So I'm coming out, hopping up and down, and my pants are melting into liquid in the floor. And he's, oh shit, you didn't need to do that. I said, all right, motherfucker, I'll get you, right? So I throw these pants away, and I've got some old, wrinkled up pair of pants that I wore the previous night in my suit bag. I put those on. We go out to the ring, Midnight Express versus the Fantastics. Bobby gets the idea. He's going to grab my pants, and he doesn't know what he's going to say really when he gets out there, but he's going to say something, and it's going to be funny, right? Except it didn't work out. Because he comes out with and Tommy Rogers tells him, don't do it, Bobby, don't do it. I'm going to do it. He comes out with my pants, and he gets on the microphone, he says, see what I've got right here? I've got Jim Cornette's pants. Like he's got a trophy somehow. And I grabbed the microphone and I said, and that's right, Bobby Fulton, I know you've always wanted to get in my pants. And Tommy's like, fuck, Bobby. So the next week, we go to Louisville, my hometown. And already it's going to be an uphill battle, because I am actually the most famous sports native of Louisville, Kentucky. Actually, they had a dinner one time. They were going to honor Muhammad Ali, but they already had another vegetable on the menu, so, too soon? I'm sorry. But anyway, so me and the Midnight go to the ring, and Bobby grew up watching the Sheik's Detroit territory, where they had wild matches, all kinds of furniture and implements and everything. He finds this big shovel, big, huge shovel, and he takes the shovel to the ring with him. Tommy Rogers once again said, Bobby, don't do it. He takes the shovel to the ring with him like he's going to clean up the place. He's going to lay everybody out with this shovel. And as soon as he gets in the ring, I've already got the microphone. I said, Bobby, what's the matter? Is your partner not housebroken? And Tommy Rogers almost beat his own partner up that night. Every time that Bobby would try to do something, it would backfire on him. But anyway, that was Bobby Fulton. He actually, liar, I'm not lying, he set my pants on fire. Where are we at?
Where are we at, Jim Raven?
To continue his question, was there anybody in Jim Crockett promotion that liked Jim Hart?
No. Not that I can think of.
Tell the story about Stu Hart, Bruce Pritchard, and Owen Hart.
Oh wait, you're getting ahead of the show. We'll come to that. You've been watching my UK tour DVD, haven't you?
I said that was a clip on that.
It actually happened not too far up from here, but we'll come to that. We'll come to that. That's my big finish. That's the best I can do, actually.
We got another one over here.
I want to know, what was the most ridiculous thing that you saw that actually sold at a firm stable?
The most ridiculous thing I ever saw that actually sold at a merch table.
Like maybe if there was like some homemade pencils or something like that. Some Jerry the King Lawler, coffee mugs.
Actually, but Jerry Lawler was one of the first guys in Memphis. I wrote a whole book about merchandising wrestling in Memphis because they did it first. He had records, he had drinking cups, wristbands, keychains, bumper stickers, wall calendars. He did, when Burt Reynolds did the nude centerfold in the 70s for Cosmopolitan, Lawler actually did the nude centerfold, except he had the crown in a strategic place. And we couldn't tell whether the crown was mostly full or mostly empty. We were optimistic. It was a half empty, or half full crown instead of half empty. But they sold a Frisbee that wouldn't fly one time. They got the design wrong. And there were holes in it where they weren't supposed to be, and you would throw it, it would just drop. So, But there's been a lot of ridiculous things sold. Actually, I think at one time, Gorgeous George, in the 50s, he used to bring a tank of like Florida, when he was wrestling in Los Angeles, because even I guess in the 50s, California had bad air, he would bring a tank of what was marked Florida air to the ring, and he would be huffing it in between falls, right? And I think they actually tried to sell empty bags containing Gorgeous George's Florida air. It didn't take off, though.
I think you got another one right here.
What's up, Jim?
I can't see you. Where you at? There we go. Okay. Oh, this is much better. Hey, there you are.
Last year, as many of us know, we lost Steve, Hot Rod, Nick Bockwinkel, Warrior. There were two guys I felt that no one really recognized except for a couple of people, Buddy Randell and Tommy Rogers. If you're going to shoot blocks on those two performances, I felt they were totally overlooked. And I thought Buddy Randell was one of the best pro guys that never really got his due in the business. Could you give us your thoughts on those two performances, please?
Well, and thank you for, since we're here at the Comedy Club atmosphere, for bringing us down and talking about dead friends. No, I mentioned Tommy and Bobby were such a great team. Tommy was really underrated. I mean, he could do everything. He wasn't that big. That's why he never got a shot up here in the WWF when he was in the WWF, because he was 5'8", but he was ripped. He was in great shape. Whereas, I will say one thing, Bobby, I love Bobby to death, but he was the heaviest human being in the world. When you tried to lift him, your balls would end up in your watch pocket. Whereas, Tommy was so light on his feet, I could slam him, I could press slam him. He'd just go up, you'd have to drag him back down out of the air. He was like lighter than air. He could do everything well. And they complemented each other. Tommy was a nice guy too, and he just, because of the bumps he took and the punishment that he gave his body, he had a bunch of health issues later on in life. He had a hip replaced, knee replaced, maybe two, I can't remember, and just, had a lot of issues. And that's one thing, and I hate to bring people down again, but before I talk about Buddy, the WWE now has this wellness program, right? Where if you're addicted to drugs or alcohol, they will pay for your rehab. And the reason that came up, to be quite honest, is because they had a number of high-profile situations where guys either passed away or had gotten involved in drugs and had problems. And it was a PR move. Because I have sympathy for those guys and their situation, but what about the guys that suddenly get cancer or get hit by a fucking bus or just through no fault of their own and they just have bad luck? They're on their own. They don't get anything from the WWE, whether they work for them or not. And I know they can't take care of every wrestler that's ever worn tights, but even guys that worked for the WWE in the past, unless you have a drug problem or an alcohol problem, they're not just going to pay for your heart transplant, or they're not going to give you any medical assistance at all, which I think is complete bullshit. Because especially when a guy's completely innocent of any wrongdoing, it didn't make any bad choices, and it's just bad luck and things that happen. In the old days, guys were considered independent contractors, and they should have been, because they had the right to go work for anybody they wanted to at any time. But now, you're like an indentured servant when you sign a contract with the WWE, and you can only work for them, and they tell you where to go, and they tell you what to do, and they tell you what to say, and they tell you what your name is, and they tell you everything about your job. That, to me, is an employee. And if they're making enough money that they can pay that Bucky Beaver motherfucker, executive producer Kevin fucking Dunn, $5 million a year, and they can do a stock scam where the McMahon family owns 98% of the stock, but they still sell it to people, and they trade it on the open market, and they're a publicly traded company, so they can all get rich because you know Wall Street's as big a work as fucking wrestling, then they can spend some money on the guys that have sacrificed their bodies and their health to entertain people and to make all those fucking suit-wearing executives with those big Bucky Beaver teeth a fucking living for all this time. That's what I think personally, but they ain't going to do it because Vince is also a Republican conservative asshole. But now that I've said that, Buddy Landel. Buddy was his own worst enemy, and I've known Buddy since I met Buddy for the first time in 1980, and I knew him and was around him. We worked with him. He was one of the unofficial, members of the Midnight Express as far as the fourth guy riding in our car in a lot of cases. And Buddy would admit it himself, he was his own worst enemy. He was so talented, not only in the ring, but as a personality. He was funny, he was glib, he could cut a great promo. But I was there when he lost a $150,000 a year spot in 1986 because he couldn't get out of bed after partying too much to go to Atlanta TV and shoot the angle. And they fired him. And he got fired. I fired him one time because he didn't like Tim Horner. Nobody did. But still, he'd be professional. He was in an I Quit match with Tim Horner. The referee puts the fucking microphone in front of his face in Johnson City, Tennessee's Freedom Hall. He said, Moon River. Buddy, sorry, you're fired. I brought him back 2 years later, 3 years later, when he straightened up and he was wearing a suit, he was in shape, and he was making bank deposits for me. There was a good buddy and a bad buddy. And every time the good buddy would make progress and we'd get a spot, for some reason the bad buddy would come out and fuck him up out of it. In Mid-South Wrestling, Bill Watts fined him so much because he was late, because he violated the dress code, because he fucked up in the match or whatever. He couldn't even take all of his fines out of one check. He had to fucking pay his fines in installments. And then Watts would give it back to him later on in increments about bonusing a little bit on his payoffs because he liked Buddy too, but he wanted to try to teach him a lesson. And I always thought when Buddy went, it would be doing something he shouldn't do with somebody he shouldn't be doing it with in some place he shouldn't be. And it would end up, it was the stupidest thing. He had a car wreck, went to the hospital, checked himself out, went home and died. And, so it didn't happen the way that we thought it would happen, but still it happened way too soon. And you're right. A lot of people these days should know a lot more about Buddy Landel because he was a great talent, but bad Buddy wouldn't let good Buddy prosper. And I'll tell you, Buddy, you know what? He wasn't a very good fucking driver. I got to tell you this story. No, seriously, to lighten it up a little bit. I quit right in Mid-South Wrestling. Dennis Condrey would drive one day, Bobby would drive one day, I'd drive one day, Buddy would drive one day. Of course, we'd switch, right? Because the trips were so long, that way we could save on gas and, support each other, blah, blah, blah. Buddy was the most distracted driver ever. He wouldn't pay attention. He was always brushing his hair. He'd talk, hey, baby, blah, blah, Buddy, the road. Just anything. And finally, one day I just said, I got out of the car and kissed the ground. I said, I can't ride with Buddy anymore. And Dennis said, well, he's got to take his turn. I said, when he takes his turn, you guys go with him if you want to. I'll drive myself. I did that for 2 weeks. And finally I come into, I think it was some town. And there, no Midnight Express, and no Buddy Landel. And Bill Dundee, the booker, comes in and says, well, your boys are going to be late. So what happened? They were riding with Bud Road. Dundee and Carl Fergie, the referee, had passed by, and they looked off the side of the road, and there is Buddy's car, and Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton and Buddy knee-deep in fucking mud in a bayou somewhere in the middle of Louisiana. Buddy had run off the road some way in broad daylight, nobody else around, he just fucking missed it somehow. And they're trying to climb out of this mud bog, and they said, can you take us to, no, you can't get in my car, you're fucking covered in mud. So they went to a payphone, this before cell phones, and they called back for Buddy's wife to bring his second car out, so they had to ride muddy to the town. It was lit, so then Bobby and Dennis quit riding with him. A week later, Buddy was teamed up with Bush Reed, and they were both going through Bunkie, Louisiana, on the way to Biloxi, Mississippi. I'll never forget this, because now I'm sitting there with the Midnight Express, and in comes Dundee again. He's just been at the box office where the phone is, and he says, well, Bush Reed and Buddy Landel have had an accident. I said, who'd they hit? He said, each other. Butch was following Buddy. Buddy had that Cadillac he was so proud of, and Butch had a Lincoln. And they're going through the middle of Bunkie, Louisiana. It's a 2-lane road with stoplights. It's the middle of a small town in Louisiana. And Buddy's just driving, and he's either brushing his hair in the mirror, or he's, hey baby, as a girl on the side of the road, whatever, but somebody stops at a stoplight in front of him, and he don't see it, and he rams into the back of them. Well, Butch was busy doing something else that involved a straw and a mirror while he was trying to drive with his knees. And he runs into the back of Buddy. Now Buddy's head hits the steering wheel, and he busts his head wide open, and he's bleeding. And fucking Butch's shit goes all over his lap and all down in the car. So Butch is trying to gather up all the remaining material. And Buddy gets out, and he's dazed, and he's staggering around like this, and he goes over to the car, and he says, Butch, are you all right? And Butch says, God damn it, Buddy. And Butch says, oh, let me help. And Buddy's leaning over trying to get Butch's cocaine up, and Butch says, Buddy, you're bleeding all over my shit. What the fuck? It took him forever to get to Biloxi. So Buddy was not a great driver, but he was a great wrestler. And he was a good guy down deep in there somewhere. Good Buddy was one of the greatest guys you could ever know. Anyway, where we at?
All right, we got there's another story about Stan Lane.
Oh, okay. Well, once again, we were talking about the guys used to, this is another thing that the wrestlers don't do now. Because now with the cell phones and the video games and all the stuff, they just sit there in the locker room and just look at their phones all day. Well, that's life. Everybody looks at their fucking phone all day, right? We used to have no entertainment. As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, if I hadn't been born a boy, I wouldn't have had anything to play with. But in the old days, you know, we would play ribs on each other and jokes on each other to lighten up the mood. And Stan Lane was a master at it. I mean, he would set them up. He would set them up. He'd make you start thinking about things he wanted you to think about days ahead of time. And one time they were all in the Memphis territory, and Stan was still one of the fabulous ones. And Killer Carl Krug, this German wrestler, big, ugly. I mean, he was ugly as a mud fence. He had to sneak up on breakfast. He was bald-headed and just horrible teeth and a monocle and this German outfit and everything. He comes back to the territory, and in Louisville, there was a girl that he had been quite sweet on, right? And Stan, after Krupp had left the territory last time, had become enamored of her as well, and they had become a little item. So Stan knew about Carl's previous dalliances with this girl. So Carl asked the boys always, let's say her name's Mabel. Because it's the old classic old Mabel ribbon wrestling. Is Mabel still here? Mabel was so sweet. Mabel was my girl. I love Mabel. Is Mabel still around? And Stan said, no, actually, Carl, nobody's seen Mabel around here quite a while, probably since about the time you left. And Carl said, oh, she's so sweet. I think I've still got her number. I'd love to try to find her. You know, she was so beautiful. Well, you never know about these things, right? So they go to the hotel that night where all the wrestlers stay, and Mabel is in Stan's room. And Stan calls Krupp's room and puts Mabel on the phone, and Killer answers the phone. Hello? Killer, it's Mabel. How are you? It's been so long since I've seen you. Oh, Mabel, I love you. Can we get together again? Well, Carl, you don't understand. After you left, my husband got out of prison. I didn't know you were married. Well, I didn't want to say because, you know, he'd been away for a while, but he's very jealous, Carl. I don't think we can see each other. Oh, well, I hate to hear this because I wanted to see you. Well, no, Christ, I think he's coming home now. I better hang up, click, right? And Carl's like, shit, damn it. 15 minutes later, it was just a false alarm, Carl. She calls him back. False alarm. It wasn't him. I really love you, but yes, he's so violent. Sometimes he beats me. Oh, my God, Mabel, I can't believe that. Yes, and Stan's feeding her all the shit to say. They're at the Days Inn in Jeffersonville, so Stan knows where Carl's room is. He's peeking out the window. He can see the light on in the room across the breezeway. And Mabel says, yes, he beats me and he's very abusive, and I just don't think that I want to get you involved. Oh, he is home now. Goodbye. Click. Carl's like, fuck. 15 minutes later, phone rings again in Carl's room. Now she's crying. Carl, it's Mabel. He called me on the phone. He knew I was talking to somebody. He made me tell him all about you. You told him about me? Yes, I told him what we had done. And I told him that you were trying to see me again, but I told you no. And, well, Carl, he made me tell you where he is, where you are, and he left with his gun. What? slams the phone down, right? Stan peeks out the window. There's this 6'3", 275-pound, bald-headed, ugly-faced fucking German in fucking boxer shorts and flip-flops with his fucking bag over one shoulder and the rest of his clothes over another shoulder, shoots out of the goddamn door of the hotel, down the fucking stairs, gets in his car, drives to the next town, never comes back to his room. They used to do that. It was big in Calgary. They used to do that where actually they would go so far as to have the alleged husband come in with a blank pistol and start firing shots at the guy that would run off in the field somewhere. It was a simpler time back then. But that's the Mabel rib. If anybody wants to pull it, it never fails, and now you know. As long as the other person is not smart to it, you know exactly what to do, and it works every time. Any other question up here? I was going to say, I think we could, well, for the benefit of the paying customers. By the way, you paid for this shit, folks. Just remember that. I do apologize in advance.
What I was going to ask is, hold the promotion that you're
Oh, God. My favorite promotion, in case that microphone sucks, by the way. I sound like James Earl Jones, the voice of God, or whatever. My favorite promotion to work, there's two of them. Mid-South Wrestling, because I got my first break there. Yeah, I'm 22 years old, and I'm in the main event at the Superdome in front of 25,000 people. So, of course, I'm shaking like a dog shit in peach seeds, right? I'm just scared to death, but working with great pros, and Bill Watts was a master, and Dundee was a great booker, and the Midnight and the Rock and Roll, those guys were great talents, and it was on-the-job training. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. If you live through Mid-South Wrestling, DiBiase said one time, he said, I worked for Watts for a year and a half. I was getting a twitch and my hair was falling out. I was making great money, but I had to quit just to regain my sanity. Mid-South, for just the way it was run and the business we did, it was their record year with us in the main events, and just how much I learned. And then Crockett, because we were there so long, we worked for Jim Crockett for 3 years until he sold to TBS and set their record business with the Rock and Roll, and we got a chance to work with the Road Warriors, Dusty and Magnum, and it was living in Charlotte, working with those guys. We made a shitload of money. I mean, you know, once again, I was like 24, 25 years old at that point, and we made almost $200,000 each that one year in 1986 when business was huge, and that would be what today? You know, unheard of, probably, with 400 grand or 500 grand or whatever, equivalent. And it was such fun, and it was great living in Charlotte and working with all of our friends and everything, and Crockett ran a great promotion. He just tried too hard to chase Vince and tried to expand too far too fast, and that's what got him in trouble. I think if he had stayed in the Carolinas and the South, you could have blasted him out with dynamite, but all of a sudden we're going to Albuquerque and Los Angeles and Seattle, and it was too much. He didn't have the infrastructure. So, but those two places were, and then in Memphis is where I started because it's where I grew up watching. So for everybody up here that was a wrestling fan, Madison Square Garden was the mecca of wrestling. For me, it was the Mid-South Coliseum. That's what I grew up watching. All the big matches happened there, and you see the films of Jerry Lawler or Barnes and Dundee or all those great stars back then wrestling in front of 11,000 people in the Mid-South Coliseum, every seat full, and Lance Russell's great voice, right, calling the action, and that's where you wanted to be. So any of those, I can't really, it's like picking my favorite kid, but thank you for the question.
We got another one back here in the back.
Hey, Joe. So, taking some notes here. The question I have for you is...
Oh, he's taking notes? Jesus Christ.
I'm thinking...
Fuck, don't take any of this down. It can be used against me in court later on. I'll tell you, I've got a good lawyer, though, at home. My law firm, Trickle Down and Drip. You've heard of it? My guy, the big bad wolf, Darren Wolf, he once got a sodomy charge reduced to tailgating. He's good.
You are among friends. You're okay. So the question I have for you is the business as a whole beyond fucked? You have Raw's the shits. You have no emotional investment. You have the WWE Network for $9.99 per month. I have no reason to pay for anything anymore. Is the business beyond fucked, beyond repair? And can you Please tell the story of how JR stopped you from beating the piss out of Voldemort.
Well, he stopped me from taking a baseball bat to it because I'll tell that one first, and I'll answer your question because I can tell that one quicker. Basically, in spring of 1999, I was driving myself insane because I was living in Connecticut, but I wanted to be back down south. And I don't mean to impugn the north here, but the traffic was getting to me. I was not happy. I was not doing anything that was thrilling me in the WWF. I was doing television announcing and booking the third-party promotions with the outside promoters, and trying to help the guys and doing a little bit of the training when they were initially setting up the developmental program when they were training guys in the warehouse in Stamford. So, but I wanted to get home, and I wanted to do a little bit more, and I knew I had to figure out some way, and that's why I run into Danny Davis and seen his operation. He had already started Ohio Valley Wrestling as a school and a small promotion in Louisville, and I pitched the idea to JR instead of training guys like Kurt Angle in a warehouse with sawdust fumes, they've got buzzsaws cutting sets, and there's Tom Pritchard trying to train Kurt Angle in a ring set up in the middle of an empty warehouse. I said, let's have a formal developmental program. Let's send these guys somewhere where they can do TV and they can wrestle on live events in front of some amount of people and they can get some training. I said, I'd be more than happy to move to Louisville for much less than I'm making right now and do that. I said, I just want you to know I got to go either way because I'm going crazy. And if I leave here without a job, I'm going to take a baseball bat and hospitalize Vince Russo my last day here, just so you know. Because I'm just fucking, we got to set, one of us has to know, right? And he said, don't do that. And he got the developmental program pushed through, and it kept me from taking a baseball bat to Vince Russo, which if there's one regret I have about my career, it's not that I didn't just punch him in the fucking face. When I had the opportunity, he stays away from me now. When I joined TNA, Dutch Mantell had been calling me for a year. And we had TV rights for the OVW TV tapes that the WWE had not bought yet, and I didn't want to stir the pot. We wanted to get our money, and also this was 2006, I was just turned off of wrestling completely. But finally we got that settled. I go to TNA, 3 months later he calls me, well, we hired somebody today. Who? Vince Russo. Fuck. So I go down and get my notice. I said, it's going to harm business, it's going to get in everybody's way, I don't want to be around this fucking guy. They let the Abyss give you the black hole slam. I'll go home. You'll fire him in 3 months when people come to their senses. I think Jerry Jarrett said that he suspected that Vince Russo was fucking Dixie Carter, is how he got that job. I refuse to believe that because while I've heard that Dixie does dally, I don't think Russo has it in him to actually, And he told me one time he'd never had sex with anybody but his wife because they were high school sweethearts. So I don't believe that he suddenly became a goddamn swinger with gold chains around his neck. But anyway, and they wouldn't accept my notice, so it was a 3-year process where I had to coexist with him, and for the respect I had for Jeff Jarrett, for his grandmother and father starting me in wrestling, and Dutch being one of my longest running friends in wrestling, I tried to help out as best I could, and he managed to somehow stab them in the back, get them moved out of the way, and stab me in the back, and he had the run of the place for a month before they brought Hogan in, and Hogan hates him worse than we all do. So he was fucked there. But anyway, that's my biggest regret. And one time, when he had first been hired, and he knew how I felt about him, see, he won't say anything in my face, he'll say it behind my back, and then he gets on Twitter, I have no problem with Jim. Well, of course, not publicly, because he wants to be babyface. I'm out front with him. I hate the motherfucker, I hope he dies. I want to live long enough. No, I want to live long enough to piss on his grave. I've already said we're both the same age. We got a 50-50 shot at this. I'm going to have a picture hanging on my wall before I die of me with one of those fucking pointed party hats on and a fucking noisemaker pissing on the grave with tombstones says Russo. And if he was honest, he'd admit everything he's said and done behind my back, but he's a lying sack of shit, so he won't. But anyway, Dutch overheard him and Jeff talking in the room, right, when the door was closed. And Jeff finally said, God damn it, Vince, if you're that so fucking worried, go ahead and have the goddamn fight with him and get it over with. See what happened. Oh! So anyway, that's the kind of fucking backstabbing trick he is. But anyway, as to your previous question, which I've completely forgotten at this point, oh, is wrestling fucked?
You know, I would have said that up until a couple of weeks ago, but I was in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and Raleigh, North Carolina last week for big time wrestling. They used the stars that the fans remember, that their mainstream names, the Rock and Roll Express, Warlord and Barbarian, and Jimmy Valiant, Ricky Steamboat. They sold out Spartanburg, did a couple thousand people, turned a couple hundred away. They had over 1,700, I believe, in Raleigh, North Carolina. I had an intergender match. That's another thing. It's intergender shit, right? But I had an intergender match with Baby Doll. 30 years after we started our feud in the very same building, I showed him how to do it. I didn't touch her once except for a thumb in the eye. She gave me a tackle. We did the old blow-up spot. I thumbed her in the eye. I tried to give her a turnbuckle. She gave me one. The referee gave me one. She kicked the powder in my face and pinned me. There's these other dumb fucks like this fucking Joey Ryan going out and wrestling competitively with women that weigh 120 pounds when they're 200. Which, I'm sorry, and I know Ronda Rousey can beat up the guy that works at the fucking Jiffy Lube, and I'm not being sexist when I say this, ladies, but no, it's not credible for a 125-pound woman to fight on an equal basis with a 200-something-pound professional wrestler that's supposed to be a badass. It just makes the whole thing look fake and silly and contrived and phony, especially when they go 10 or 15 minutes, they have this 4-star match. It makes it look like anybody can do it. It's just another example of the demeaning of wrestling. But, back to your question, with all these names that people know in the Carolinas, they do draw big. Current wrestling doesn't draw that big there, but legend shows do. But then we go to Newburgh last night, and once again, you know, Mike Lombardi, Northeast Wrestling, does a great job. He has Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk and Jim Ross and Rey Mysterio and Matt Hardy and myself, for what that's worth, and other stars on these cards, and he does great. He's running outdoor stadiums. He's selling out these buildings. They're always going to be wrestling fans, and they're always looking for a good show. And the fans there last night didn't come to say, oh, well, this 5-star match with these moonsaults and the work rate was incredible. They came to have a good time. They came to bring their kids. They came to meet the stars. They came to cheer for the good guys and boo for the bad guys. That's what wrestling is. And there's still fans that want to see that. It's just that we keep trying to put the boost to those fans and not give them what they want to see. And the comedy writers that work for the WWE and everybody that tries to imitate them have to justify their salaries that they shouldn't be drawing by writing these convoluted and contrived storylines. That there's nothing worse than a wrestler trying to act. Wrestlers are great wrestlers and bad actors for the most part. And the more complicated and contrived and convoluted you make the story, and the more unbelievable it becomes, and then the worse you turn the people off, because they can tell that the guys don't mean it. Passion and emotion and realism and legitimacy is what always attracted people to wrestling to begin with. It's a conflict between two parties, one that you're predisposed to like and one that you're predisposed to dislike. And they have a simple situation, whether it be over money, over a championship, over glory, over ego, where they get involved in a situation where they're going to have a fight. You sell tickets to see the resolution. It ain't fucking rocket science and it ain't brain surgery, but they try to make it that way. And that's why the UFC, to me, is the biggest wrestling promotion in the world right now, because that's exactly. And thank you, by the way, for coming to see me instead of McGregor and Diaz for $59.95 on the pay-per-view. But I'd like to see the thing myself. But that's wrestling, and so the independents are giving, in some cases, especially these ones that draw well, you've got the, I love the Ring of Honor. I love the guys that work there. I like the talent roster. Sinclair Broadcasting gave me gas after a while. But those guys are great athletes that hit hard. I'm talking about the Briscoes, who are believable and who are tough guys. And I'm talking about guys like Roderick Strong and Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards and Jay Lethal and Adam Cole, who's a future, he is a present superstar. And those guys, they have great performances. And it's only the pains in the ass like the Kevin Steens and El Genericos that has been well documented. I didn't say they couldn't wrestle. I said they were pains in the ass. I don't know when the Booker's instructions became the Booker's suggestions, but to them it was. But if the talent treats their business seriously and works on getting better and getting over and exposing themselves to a mainstream group of fans, and they can buy into what those talents are doing, that creates more wrestling fans. And that's what I'd like to see guys do. And Northeast Wrestling is doing it. Big Time Wrestling is doing it. And the TNA, my God, they could sell pussy on a troop train. All the stars of TNA, they can't draw 15 cents of Chinese money on a TNA show. They don't even run them anymore. They let the people in free for the goddamn TV shows. But when those same stars go out and work for Big Time Wrestling or Northeast Wrestling or any other wrestling promotion, the people go to see them. It's not they don't like the talent. It's they don't like that fucking useless twat Dixie Carter and what she's turned her company into, spending her daddy's money. That's, so wrestling is always going to be around. I was down on it for a while because I thought it couldn't be saved, but I see the fans are still there, and you guys are proof that fans are still there. You just want to see something that doesn't make you want to fucking slap somebody. That's all. It's not that fucking hard.
Hey, Jim, you mentioned Dennis Condrey before. There's a rich story about that, too.
Oh, well, once again, I told this on Steve Austin's podcast. And see, I've been riding around with the guys from Collector's Realm all weekend, and we've been telling stories. They say, oh, that'd be a good one to tell, and that'd be a good one to tell. And if you don't listen to Steve Austin's podcast, you may not have heard this. If you do listen to Steve Austin's podcast, you may have forgotten it. If you haven't forgotten it, work with me, people. Dennis Condrey, before he was partners with Bobby Eaton, he was partners in Tennessee with a guy named Phil Hickerson. And they were actually one of the best heel teams I ever saw. And Phil was a big old raw-boned country boy from Jackson, Tennessee, had a big belly, and was a great worker. And Dennis was much younger, even though he always looked old at the time. And then they both had really bleach blonde hair, and they had big lips across the butts. They were going the whole, old-time heel route. Big lips across the ass of their tights and the bleach blonde hair, and they'd hug each other when the babyface fucked with them. And this other Memphis wrestling icon named Tojo Yamamoto, Japanese wrestler, he looked like Buddha, right? But the people believed in him, and he was a big babyface at that point, but he was kind of homophobic. I'm not speaking ill of Tojo, he's gone now, but he was and he would always look at Condrey and Hickerson kind of sideways when they did the hugging thing, like they weren't really working, he didn't know what was going on. And so Dennis comes up with what is known as the classic double reverse rib. That's when you try to rib somebody, but in actuality, you're ribbing the person that's helping you allegedly rib the other person. I will explain how that happens. Dennis said to Phil, he said, wouldn't it be funny if in the Louisville Gardens, when Tojo comes back downstairs to the locker room from his match, you got to come down the stairs and you turn right and you go into the locker room area. If he came around that corner, and Phil, you were on your knees in front of me, it was like you were about to blow me, and he caught us in the act, right? And Phil said, that'd be hilarious. Can you imagine the look on Tojo's face? Yes, I can, Phil. Let's do it. So they went the whole way with it, right? They got a lookout to tell them when Tojo was coming down from his match. And Hickerson is down on his knees in front of Dennis, and Dennis has got his tights down around his knees like this. And imagine that the microphone that I'm holding now is a large throbbing cock. And it's hanging there, and Phil is like this close because, they want to make it look good, right? And they get the Iggy that Tojo's coming, and they get set, and then Dennis said, can you imagine his face? And Phil said, yeah, and Phil wants to see Tojo's face. So as he's got his mouth open, he kind of turns toward where Tojo is coming, so he's not looking at the large throbbing cock that's hanging in his face. Like that. As Tojo comes around the corner, Dennis grabs the back of Phil's head and shoves his dick all the way down Phil's throat. Said his tongue felt like sandpaper, right? Tojo is mortified. Like that. But even more mortified is Hickerson, who comes up off his knees and chases his good friend Dennis Condrey up the stairs, out the back door of the Louisville Gardens, and halfway down fucking 4th Street before he loses him, because fear does run faster than anger. Phil wouldn't talk to Dennis for 3 days. They had to ride in separate cars. They had to wrestle together as a team every night. But when they tag each other, Phil would tag Dennis like, he'd about break his hand. And finally, he saw the humor in the situation, apparently, because they stayed together for a while. But Austin got a kick out of the story. I don't know what to say. But that is a double reverse rib. He got the rib on Tojo and at the same time ribbed his cohort and his co-conspirator. Which that just goes to show you, if you know any homophobic people, don't try to do a fake blowjob for their because it might come back on you.
We got another question back here.
Yeah, I was wondering the story behind Bill Watts making Ron Simmons world champion despite him being a flaming racist.
You're ribbing, right? Or do you seriously believe that? It's another one of the things that fucking internet has said is just stupid. He's not. You know that, right?
I wasn't sure. I know it's making rounds.
Once again, it's people that didn't understand what the fuck they were talking about. They put this on the internet. When you think about it, Bill Watts his entire territory was based around the Junkyard Dog, who was the hottest babyface at one time in wrestling. He made the Dog a star. To be honest, Dog was not the greatest wrestler, but he was a tremendous promo. In his younger days, before he had his issues with substances and everything, he was a great athlete, in good shape, played a little football. And when he came down there, Watts was not only the first guy to have an African-American top babyface rule his territory, he also, the guy that got that guy over, he had the first African-American booker in wrestling, Ernie Ladd, who was one of the great stars in wrestling. And they came up with the idea that because Dog's name was Sylvester Ritter. Sylvester, even though, he looked great, does not exactly strike fear in your heart, right? So they said, what about he's the Junkyard Dog from the fucking Jim Croce song, meaner than a junkyard dog. And he would come to the ring hauling a wheelbarrow full of junk from the junkyard, right? And then gradually they got that out of the way. It was a little silly, but Dog's promos and his athleticism got him over, and they fucking, they smashed him over everybody. He won every match in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and he became a big star to the point where, the chant that they do at the New Orleans Saints game, who dat, who dat, who dat, talk about beating no Saint, it was Dog. Who dat, talk about beating a dog. Dog was so popular when Ted DiBiase turned on him in New Orleans, Grizzly Smith had to take Teddy out of the fucking building in the trunk of his car. People were going to lynch him. Ernie Ladd, as a matter of fact, got fired as booker because in an early match, and of course Watts brought him back. He always did because Ernie was a great guy and a huge talent. But in one of the early matches with Dog, he sent him down to New Orleans, and he had him booked against Scott Irwin, the Super Destroyer. And Ernie calls Watts the next morning. This is in Watts' book. And he says, Bill, your boy don't have it. He's not going to make it. Just to see what he had, I put him through 20 minutes with Super D last night. And by the time the match was over, JYD's tongue was hanging out like a long red necktie. And Watts said, you're fired. And Ernie said, and what's more, what? You're fired. You're my booker. I've told you he's going to be my top star. I didn't send him down there for you to find out what he couldn't do. I sent him down there to find out what he could do. He should have beat Super D in 5 minutes. You're fired. Ernie said, point taken, boss. And then he brought him back later on, but they got Dog over. Watts had the first African-American booker. He had the first African-American single superstar that was the undisputed top guy in his territory. When Dog left and took Vince's offer, he tried to replicate it every way he could. At one time, he was employing more black wrestlers than any other promotion in the country because he knew that he had a large black population in his territory, not necessarily in Texas, which was more Hispanic and cowboy, to be honest with you, but in Louisiana and Mississippi, and he gave the fans what they wanted. And when he made Ron Simmons the world champion, he did the same thing in Baltimore, which going all the way back to the Baltimore, D.C. area, has always gotten behind black baby faces. Bobo Brazil, Bearcat Wright, going back to the days of Vince Sr., he said Ron Simmons was a hell of a football player. They retired his jersey, put him in the Hall of Fame at Florida State University. He was a tremendous athlete. He was a great worker. He was coming into his own. He wanted to pull the trigger on making him champion. He did it there in Baltimore because he thought it would get over, and it did. People were crying. They were happy about it. Ron, at that point, maybe not quite ready to carry the whole ball, and it didn't really get over in the rest of the country, but it's not for lack of trying. And for some reason, people have the idea that just because Watts is blunt and plain-spoken and says what he thinks about things, he's kind of like me. Imagine that. Where did I get it from? Somehow everybody's like, that Bill Watts, he's a racist. That's bullshit. He employed more black wrestlers, more black bookers, office staff, whatever the fuck, and gave them more chances than almost anybody else in the business. So, once again, I don't know what to tell you. You can either look at the facts or you can look at what people say on the internet.
Well, since we're still talking about that, we spoke last night about the Hall of Fame coming up. The Freebirds are going in. Obviously, with the recent things with Hulk Hogan and him getting taken out of the WWE because of racist comments, do you think that it's a little strange that they're putting the Freebirds in who have the Confederate flag and the face paint and all that?
Well, no, because for one thing, they've had Michael Hayes up here for 20 years standing over and go, please, 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 I love you. I love you, Michael. I kid. No, because they were from Georgia. As a matter of fact, I think the state flag of Georgia, even still, or at least I know 30 years ago, had the Confederate flag as part of the state flag. They were heels. That was their gimmick. They came from the state of Georgia to come to Texas and take out the local heroes. You used to be able to be heels and get heat, and when people weren't smart to the wrestling business, they said, well, there was no good dirty heels, but now they just say, oh, the promotion told them to do that. Well, that's another thing we've let out of the bag. Is heels can't get heat anymore because people don't think they're really saying or doing these things. They know that somebody's telling them what to say and telling them what to do. I know that Chris Angel don't get flattened with the steamroller and scraped up with a spatula and fluffed back out, but I can't look up on the internet and see the plans for it, or elsewise I would say, well, shit, that's how he does it, and it's simpler than I thought it was. Since I don't know how he does it, it's a cool looking trick and I want to watch it over and over again until I can figure it out visually, which I can't because obviously if he's a good magician, he hides that. Same thing with wrestling. And just because the Freebirds carried the flag, and once again, Tracy Smothers in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, the reason why his whole gimmick was he's the wild-eyed Southern boy. I didn't change his gimmick. I didn't bring him to fucking Seattle because that wouldn't have got over. I bring the wild-eyed Southern boy who waves the Confederate flag and talks about mom and God and country and all that stuff because in the South, people like that shit. He's a babyface there. It wasn't about being racist. It was about has anybody here ever been to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina? Yeah. Every gimmick store, every souvenir shop. I have a Confederate flag fluffy blanket that I got there 25 years ago. I don't hate black people, I just like my fluffy blanket, right? For a lot of people, that Confederate flag is a very touchy symbol and it reminds them of bad things. For a lot of people who never thought of it that way, it just reminds them of fucking home. And so, if a heel wrestler from Georgia comes to Texas to fight a babyface wrestler and they carry their state flag or their flag against and then the Von Erichs would come out with the yellow rose and the Texas flag, and it was a big goddamn deal. Or if Tracy Smothers comes out and he's a babyface waving the flag, you guys will get pissed at this, but the way I really got heat on the Dirty White Boy and Ron Wright, his manager, they were so mad that the people of the South were supporting Tracy Smothers instead of them. They announced they had sold their property in Tennessee and moved to New York. Holy shit, what's more, they started wearing New York Yankees jerseys. The Klan came to a show in Pikeville, my Bluegrass Brawl, where it was Dirty White Boy against Tracy Smothers in a chain match, and they went up to Tracy and said, we're keeping an eye on that Ron Wright. If you don't beat that Dirty White Boy, we'll take him out. And they showed the guy, they showed Tracy his gun, right? Tracy goes back and tells White Boy, and Ron had his gun under his fucking blanket when he went out in his wheelchair that night, but luckily, nothing happened because Tracy was winning the match. If Dirty White Boy had been winning the match, we potentially had a murder. But it was all done to create emotion in people. The heels wanted to get as much heat as possible and make people dislike them, and the babyface wanted to make people like him as much. And the part of the country that you're in dictates how that you act in terms of whether you get over as a babyface or a heel. The same thing that's popular in one part of the country would be unpopular in the other part of the country. That's why territorial wrestling was stronger when it was territorial instead of nationwide, because you can't play to the whole country. People in New York, people in Florida, people in Texas, and people in Portland, Oregon like different shit in a lot of cases. That's just a fact. So you played to your audience, and that's what it was. So yes, the Freebirds should get in the Hall of Fame. They're a revolutionary tag team. I don't think Jimmy Garvin should be in the fucking Hall of Fame. I know he was a Freebird when they ran up down the road and drank Jack Daniels, but Michael Hayes and Jimmy Garvin as the Freebirds didn't draw 15 cents. It was Michael Hayes, Terry Gordy, and Buddy Roberts. And they belong in the Hall of Fame because they were a revolutionary tag team. And also, by the way, Michael is not the first one to come out to music. Everybody knows Gorgeous George did. But Bad Leroy Brown in 1977 in Memphis did the same thing with the Jim Croce song, and the Freebirds didn't get to Memphis till 79, because I saw their first match where they first came out to Freebird, and it was fucking cool, but it wasn't the first.
All right, we got another question here.
From the fun table.
Alright, on YouTube one time I was seeing like a very small snippet of a shoot interview you had, and you had beef with Shawn Michaels. I was wondering, where did that come from?
Oh, God. It just came from him being just the biggest fucking asshole in the world, is where it came from. He was an attitude problem. He was always built up. He did. How many belts did he win? How many belts did he fucking lose in the ring? He always came up with a way to lose his smile and go home. Vince put up with it. I don't know why. It was just, he treated Jose Lothario like a piece of shit. Jose's the one training, broke him into business. He fucking treated me like I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. He yelled at me on several occasions for shit that was not a yellable offense. Including when I didn't run fast enough from Jose one night, when he wanted us to both get out of the arena so he could do his kip up, and all the attention would be on him. If they're watching the 60-year-old man and the fat manager instead of you, then you ain't over, motherfucker. But just the way he treated other people, the way that the whole clique and their little boys' clubhouse treated everybody in the locker room and held the whole company hostage. They were unprofessional. He showed up in no condition to perform. The way that the whole thing with the fucking match with Brett in Montreal, but just the whole 9 yards. And I don't agree with anything he ever did. I don't like him. I don't think a leopard changes his spots. I think he's one of these guys that found God because he fucked his life up so bad nobody on earth would speak to him. I think he's a fucking phony. He still goes out in the woods and murders God's animals, even though he's found God. I don't think, like Ted DiBiase, he's legitimate with it. I don't believe in the whole religion thing, but I believe Ted and some other guys are legitimate. I don't think Shawn is. I think Shawn's a fucking big flaming fucking asshole, and he needs to have a big goddamn dab of Preparation H put on him, in my personal opinion. That's what started that whole thing.
Did you ever see the scar?
What, say again now?
Did you ever see the scar?
Oh, from his back surgery?
Yes.
Where the greatest in-ring performer of the 90s who could sell his ass off and make it look legitimate had a back injury so he could go home and get paid for 4 years to do nothing? I never saw the scar. No, I never did.
Wait, what about the knee surgery? Well, what about the knee though? Did you see any scars or anything?
Oh, I'm sure he's had knee surgery. I've had fucking knee surgery. Goddamn, everybody gets knee surgery. I'm talking about a career-ending injury that 4 years he got paid, and then when WCW went out of business and Vince didn't need to pay him anymore, suddenly that back got a whole shitload better, and he came back and outperformed everybody in the ring again. Fuck. Jesus. All right. Anyway, where are we at? We lost a table over here. It's either late or they're just offended. I don't know.
I couldn't tell you.
It's not your week to watch him, is it?
No, not this one. It's his. Wrestling theory question. Do you think face managers can ever work?
Babyface managers?
Yes, correct.
Only if there's somebody on the other side. I told Paul E. when we did the Midnight thing, I said, you could turn Genghis Khan babyface, right? He was there for me to play off of, and it was the old situation where they were familiar with me, and I had gotten under their skin, but I'd gotten under their skin in a good and bad way. And it is the old thing where he may be a prick, but he's our prick. And here comes this outside prick, so fuck him, we'll go with our prick. I wanted to do it because I wanted to prove that it could be done. And I think I did it quite successfully for the first several months. And then when they split us up, split me and Paulie off, and it wasn't the Midnight anymore, and it wasn't a personal issue, and all of a sudden the Midnight were just baby faces, and I was there especially with heel teams that didn't have a manager, so all of a sudden the baby faces outnumbered the heels. It wasn't the right situation, and then it got really tough. And then that's when we tried to figure out a way to turn back. But it can work, but for a limited amount of time, and only if there's somebody, the strong personality on the other side of the ring to be the counterpoint. But we did a pretty good job of it for a while there. And everybody, even when Paulie and I didn't dislike each other, all the boys believed we did, right? And I got to tell you this story. Fucking Paulie comes in Atlanta TV one time, and he would always go home to New York when he had a few days off, right? And he'd always come back with tales of his exploits. So he comes in Atlanta TV one night and he says, when I was in New York, when I was home, I can't do Paul, but imagine Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson with a bit of a New York accent. He said, when I was home, I went to the China Club. And Paul was always talking about going to the China Club because he was the hip in thing. You know, when I would go home, I'd sit there on the couch and play with the fucking dog and have a goddamn cheeseburger. He'd go to the China Club. He said, guess who I saw? I said, I don't know, Paul, who'd you see? He said, Jack Nicholson. Now, it helps that he does a great Jack Nicholson impersonation, right? But, okay, I can buy this. Jack Nicholson in the China Club in New York City, I can buy this. He said, guess what he said to me? I said, wait a minute, now he talked to you, right? He came over to me, I said, he came over to you. He came over to me, and he looked at me, and he said, kid, watch the tennis racket. Now Jack Nicholson is a fan of our fucking angle. He's watching us on TBS every Saturday, right? Paul, this is what you're telling me. That's what he said. He said, I swear on my father's life. Now I've got to make the choice whether Jack Nicholson is a fan of our angle or you wish your father dead, Paul. Right? He wouldn't come off it. He will tell you these stories, and he found the way. He clued me in on this. I never did it, but he found the way to refund the non-refundable airline tickets. This is one of the times he got fired. He got fired several times from WCW. Once, has anybody heard the story where he cussed out Ric Flair? I was there. Here's what happened. He doesn't have anybody to manage at that point. They're finding somebody new for him. Flair's the booker. I'm on the committee. Flair says, go out and cut this 2-minute promo about how you're on a worldwide talent search, you're going to find the greatest talent, whatever. Boom. Paul goes out and he cuts one of those promos, and he's so good. Paul is a great promo. He was a good manager. He couldn't work worth a lick. God damn, I blew him up one time. That shows you how bad he was. But great promo, great booker, can get the most out of the least. But he went out and he cut one of those promos where he was playing to the, and this is 1989, so there was a small smart fan population. He's trying to get over in the sheets. But meanwhile, out of the 3 million people watching the show or whatever, the other 2,995,000 don't know what the fuck he's talking about. It's one of those smart promos. And Flair's sitting there at the monitor. And I'm standing behind him, and Kevin's over here. He's, what the fuck is this? Who is this fucking guy? It's Paul. No, who does this fucking guy think he is that he can just go out there and just say anything he fucking wants? We don't even know what the fuck he's talking about. He's not saying anything I said to say. Flair's working himself up, right? I'm staying out of it. Look, he gets up as Paulie has finished his promo and he's coming back around. Flair gets up and he fucking storms out. I got to see this, right? So in center stage, they had it was in the hallway back there, they had these things that kind of came out like the support beams for the seats, and I'm kind of looking around. Paulie comes around the corner and Flair says, you're done. Paulie says, thank you, I'll see you tomorrow. Not like he's done that night. No, you're done. You're fucking fired. You're not worth a shit. You don't say what I fucking say. Get the fuck out. And Flair goes and he goes back in the locker room, he slams the door. Then Paulie picks up a garbage can and throws it at the door that Flair's just slammed, then fucking cuts the promo. I'm standing back here, you don't know I'm there, and he cuts the promo on the empty hallway, and it became that he threw a garbage can at Flair and cut a promo on him, but he didn't. But he figured out a way to refund the plane tickets. And TBS would buy you the plane tickets you were supposed to travel on, right? And they would put them on the Turner Broadcasting credit card. And you couldn't refund them and get money back off of them. They would refund the credit card, but you could trade them up. If it was a $300 ticket, you got fed a $350 fare, you could trade them up, pay the extra $50. He figured out, Paul did this, I'll tell you another one in a minute, but he figured out that if you put your credit card down for the extra, and then you traded that $350 ticket up for a $400 ticket and put your credit card for the extra, and then traded it up again, sooner or later the original credit card number would be off the ticket, it'd only be yours, then he'd refund the whole fucking thing. So instead of flying home, he would stay with some rat that he knew in fucking Atlanta, and he'd refund the plane tickets, and they finally caught him and they fired him one time. So Flair fired him one time, then they fired him one time for the plane tickets, then came the 1-800 buy this shit scam, right? Because it's Smoky Mountain Wrestling, our TV show. We were on not only a number of broadcast stations around our area, but also we were on the Channel America Network, on the low power stations and everything. We had pretty good coverage for the time. And Bill Behrens was our agent for, you know, the 1-800 spots, like the Popeel Pocket Fisherman and all that shit. If you had a dedicated 800 number to your show, and if you ran that commercial, if anybody bought the product or the record or whatever it was, you got a payoff. But there was one spot, Solaflex, the big exercise machine, right? Well, if you just sent in for the video and the information, because it was a big ticket item, but if you sent in for the video and the information on it, on your 800 number, you got a $5 payoff. So the first time we ran the Solaflex ad, we made like $2,200 that month or whatever, $1,752, whatever it was, right? And when Behrens was checking in, they said, boy, we sure thought that your program would do what that other wrestling program does. What's that? ECW. Well, we sent them a check for over $7,000 last month. Then I started thinking, I've got a fucking Solaflex fucking tape in the mail. And then Dennis Coraluzzo, my good friend from down in Philly, happened to mention that he got one addressed to Dick Coraluzzo. And then I started checking around. Everybody that was in me and Paulie's mutual social circle was getting these fucking tapes, whether they called for them or not. The little bastard, he was so... Once again, he's an evil genius. He had people going through their address books and calling and claiming to be all these people and ordering these things so he would get money for ECW, right? Two can play at that fucking game, right? This is wrestling and we need money. I told Brian Hildebrand, Mark Curtis, right? I said, Brian, get your address book, do the same thing. Call and order everybody that you know, and then I'll get somebody else to do it, or we'll get you another book or whatever. Okay, Jim, I'll do it. He calls the first one, boom, ordered. Calls the second one, boom, ordered. Called the third one, got the same operator he just talked to the first time. Didn't I just talk to you? He's like, hung up, right? We got $15 off that scam. How Heyman would get away with it, I have no fucking idea, but he's slick like that, right? But he was getting $7 grand a month or whatever from Solaflex. We got 15 bucks and busted. Try to be honest. What the fuck? Anyway, and that's one quote he said. It's actually in a book on the way that he got his first press pass to be a photographer in Madison Square Garden. He actually called up and bullshitted Vince Sr.'s office, that he found out where Vince Sr. went to eat after the Garden shows. And he called the office and said, I talked to Vince and he said that at such and such restaurant that I could get a goddamn press pass or whatever. Okay, I guess, well then all right. He said, I find honesty overrated. Paulie and I are like the bizarro world, mirror images of each other. He's northern, I'm southern. He likes to lie, I like to tell the truth. But we have that bizarro world thing where we can come together on mutual enemies. Because he wanted to be writing the WWF show, whether it be SmackDown or Raw, and Stephanie couldn't stand him. Whereas I wanted to be at OVW and wanted nothing to do with the WWF office whatsoever. So they had to push my buttons to get me out of OVW, and gradually I cracked, and they had an excuse to get rid of me there. They couldn't fire me from OVW because I owned the company, but they could release me from my consultant's contract, and I didn't stand in Danny's way, etc. Plus, I was still making money from them because I owned part of the company. Then they sent Heyman down to Louisville, where they knew he didn't want to be, to try to run him off by making him book OVW. It's wrestling. That's why everybody's crazy. But we can band together on common enemies because I can respect him because he has a track record. He does have talent. He is a wonderful fucking promo and all the other things I mentioned. Whereas a guy like Russo, you can't fucking figure out anything he does good except fuck shit up. He can fuck up an animal. But so I do have respect for Paulie, but goddamn, he's a fucking crooked motherfucker. Anyway, what time is it, by the way?
It's getting close.
It's getting close. Let's take one more question, and then I'll answer yours that you asked over there when you were trying to jump the gun on our big finish.
Okay, here we go.
10 years ago, there was an internet radio show guy would interview a ton of legends, and one guy that I never heard of that I thought was awesome was Buck Roby. So I didn't know if you had any good stories about Buck.
Colonel Buckley Christopher Robley. Don't call me Yellow Belly. Buck Robley was a guy that had a horrible physique, but a great voice, a good promo, and a good mind for the business. And he looked, in my opinion, outlaw as shit, but he drew some money, especially in the Mid-South area. He had a good mind for booking, but he couldn't put himself... when you're a booker, but you're also one of the boys, you get heat from both sides. The promoter expects you to look out for his interests first, but the boys still say, wait, you're trying to fucking zoom me, Buck? You're one of the boys, you're one of us. He always took the boys' side and not the promoter's side, and you have to kind of figure out a way to walk that tightrope where you're not screwing the boys, but at the same time you're looking out for the promoter's business. Sometimes those are mutually exclusive goals because the promoter is always going to be there and he's always going to run that business, whereas the wrestlers are going to come and go. But you still have to be honest with guys. Buck did draw a lot of money, especially under Bill Watts as his booker down there, and he had the book in a number of places. I never got to work for him then, and I didn't see him much as an active wrestler. But when I left WCW in 1991, I was setting up Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Buck was back in New Orleans. And he had found an angel, as they say in the business. When you find an angel, that's an investor. That's somebody that gives you money to do your thing. And he found an angel. And this angel was a guy that I believe he had a car lot, but he was also an Elvis impersonator. And his whole deal for starting a wrestling promotion was, because he was a wrestling fan, he wanted to be the heel manager and then suddenly turn babyface and give all the kids free tickets to go to the wrestling matches and become a big deal in New Orleans for being this charitable babyface Elvis lookalike. I'm not making this shit up. I swear to fucking God. And Buck calls me in Charlotte and he's got that voice down there and he says, Cornette, I want you to come down and make my TV. And he tells me this whole thing. I said, I got to see this shit. And I went down, it was either once or twice. I managed Ron Powers from St. Louis and but they did TV at the St. Bernard Civic Center that Bill Watts used to run, and they had a pretty good crowd then because it hadn't been long since Mid-South had folded up. But he met this guy at the racetrack because Buck was big on the horses and any other form of gambling. I think he would have bet on whether the sun was going to come up tomorrow or not. So anyway, he met Elvis at the racetrack, and Elvis wanted to be a big baby face, and so you see where this was headed when Elvis's dreams did not materialize. They did about 5 or 6 tapings and went away, but I got a chance to work with the legendary Buck Robley, and it was fun, but it was past the prime, so to speak, of Buck. Guys, I want to say real quick before I answer your question that you asked earlier, thank you very much for coming, except for these fucking pricks that left early without so much as a fare thee well. We're going to be doing a meet and greet also. I don't know if we're back there where if you are not sick of me enough so far and you haven't drunk enough yet, you can come back and I'll sign autographs, take pictures. We've got the merchandise available. I will kiss babies, especially female babies between the ages of 18 and 35. We'll hang out for a while, whatever you guys want to do, but I got to tell the last story. The reason I saved this for last is because this kind of got over when I did my tour of the United Kingdom a couple of years ago. And yes, I did, under the doctor's care of Xanax, take a plane across an ocean. I don't like flying, I never have. I feel like when you put yourself in a metal tube 5 miles up in the air with a bunch of strangers breathing who knows what germs on you, and you're at the whim of is the pilot, did he have a fight with his wife? Is he suicidal? Is he drunk? Is there going to be pilot error? Now you throw terrorism into the mix. My asshole's so tight you could shove a fucking lump of coal up and come out with a 10-carat diamond if I'm on a fucking airplane. So, my wife Xanaxed me into complete unconsciousness and I flew across the ocean. I woke up the next day in a fucking hotel. Don't know how I got there. We were there for 2 weeks, repeated the procedure on the way back. But I got to tell this story, which I swear to God is true. In Manchester, I told it every night because the people over there seemed to like it, and Davey Boy Smith's involved, and he obviously is British, but I got to tell it in Manchester with Georgia Smith there, who is Davey's daughter, obviously Davey and Diana's daughter, and she's moved back over there. She's successful now. She's a voiceover artist, and she's beautiful. I'd last seen her when she was about 2 feet tall, and of course, Camp Cornette didn't fare too well by guys in the WWF. Yokozuna, Owen, and Davey are all gone now. And so I kind of told this story because it showed everybody's heard what a great ribber Owen was. But this is one time when he ribbed me by not ribbing me. And it shows Davey and Owen's reputation they had in the WWF locker room that he could get away with this. We're sitting at Raw one night. And we're back in the bowels of the building, and I think it's where we were doing interviews, and I was going over some paperwork because I was on the creative team at the time, but I was also managing them. And Owen and Davey come. Owen has a phone in his hand, and it's a red phone. It looks like the phone that Commissioner Gordon would use to call Batman, right? And I mean, it's the old hang-up phone, right? Because this was 1997. He comes around the corner into the room with a red phone, Commissioner Gordon phone, with the cord trailing behind him. It's obviously can't be plugged into anything. It's one of those backstage inter-office building phones or whatever. And there's Davey behind him, always the co-conspirator, coming right in. And Owen says, phone call for you. I said, okay, I'll bite. Who is it? It's Stu. He wants to talk to you. Okay, now does anybody remember the program that they were doing? It was not my idea, but I was trying to do the best I could with it. When Shawn Michaels was the champion and Diana, Davey Boy's wife, accused him of improper advances on Raw. The Fun Table remembers this. And I actually was the first person ever to use the word fornicator on WWF television because we confronted Shawn Michaels with the evidence we had. That you, Shawn Michaels, you have tried to deflower this most delicate of young women, that you have tried to place your hands in her innermost parts, and you have tried to make her break her marital bonds. You are a deceitful wretch, Shawn Michaels. You indeed are a fornicator. And Vince didn't know I was, because we didn't have writers then. We came up with our own shit. We had the gist, the story, we told it. Vince didn't know I was going to say fornicator. He's standing there holding the microphone. All of a sudden he goes, wait a minute, I kind of like that. You know, you see him to himself, and it's in the Bible, so they couldn't believe it. But anyway, we had done that the previous week. So now Owen comes around with the phone. He says, it's a phone call for you, Stu. Okay. It helps to know that Bruce Pritchard, everybody in wrestling does an impression of Stu Hart, but Bruce Pritchard does a really good one, right? So I pick up the phone, and it's obviously like I said, the inner building phone. Hello? Jim? Yeah, this is Stu. Hey Stu, how are you? Really, I'm just calling because, I saw the Raw last week, and it just seems like I don't understand this angle that they're doing. They're making Diana look like some kind of whore. I said, well, yeah, Stu, it wasn't my idea. I'm just trying to do the best I could with it, He said, well, the kids are in school up here in Calgary, and, they have to go to school, and the people seeing this on TV, it's making Diana look like some kind of whore. I said, well, whose idea it was, don't you? No, whose idea was it? It was Bruce's, Bruce Pritchard. He's one of those sexual deviants. One of those perverts. He's the kind of guy who goes to the peep shows where they got to mop up the floor after it and everything. He's always carrying those Marilades in his suitcase and his bag around him. I didn't know that about Bruce. He always seemed like such a fine boy. Oh no, I'll tell you, Bruce, he's horrible. He'd go to all those X-rated theaters, all those porn. Oh my God, he's lube, everything in his bag. Well, I just don't know about this thing because, like I said, the kids here and the family, and they know us up here, and I just don't understand why they're trying to make Diana look like some kind of whore. Well, I'll tell you, Stu, if I were you, I'd call Vince. I'd get to the bottom of this. I'd call Vince, tell him exactly what you think, because that Bruce, he's just gotten out of control. Well, I guess I'm just going to have to do that because after all, we got the kids up here and I just can't let Diana look like some kind of whore. Well, I'm sorry I couldn't help you further, Stu, but you talk to Vince and I'm sure he can straighten the whole thing out. Okay, well, Jim, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Well, goodbye. I set the phone down. I look up at Owen. I said, who was that? He said it was Stu. Just then, immediately, around the corner, carrying papers, obviously oblivious to everything that has just previously occurred, comes Bruce Pritchard. Oh, no. I see him, I look down at the phone, back up at Bruce, I said, who was that? No one said, it was Stu. He ribbed me by not ribbing me, it was fucking Stu. I don't know whether Stu called Vince. I don't know whether Vince called Bruce. I don't know whether Diana continued to look like some kind of whore. But they cut the fucking angle off the next week. It was done. Boom. Out. Gone. Owen was so good that he could rib you by telling you the truth to your face and you still would fuck yourself up. That's how good Owen Hart was at being a ribber. And Georgia Smith loved that story because, you know, her dad, Stu, was famous, and her mother was honestly not some kind of hooer. So anyway, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you coming out and headed that way. Thank you for your patience in letting me get through this. I appreciate it. And fuck those guys. They missed the best story. Good night, Poughkeepsie, wherever you are.